Paris, 1789. The fall of the Bastille. The screams pierce through the summer heat. Smoke chokes the narrow streets of the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, turning the afternoon air thick and gray, bitter on the tongue. A fortress 7 centuries old trembles under the thunder of cannon fire and the rage of thousands. Bodies fall from the walls, their uniforms torn, their final moments frozen in expressions of shock and disbelief. Blood pools on cobblestones still warm from the July sun, mixing with spilled wine and gunpowder, creating dark rivers that flow between the stones. A governor will soon lose his head to a butcher's knife, paraded through streets on a pike, while crowds cheer and spit and curse the old order. Mothers lift their children onto their shoulders to see. This is not war. This is not invasion. This is something else entirely. Something that has no name yet. Something that will reshape the world from this moment forward. This is the moment when the old world dies in fire and fury, when a symbol becomes a target, when fear transforms into unstoppable rage, when the impossible happens. July 14th, 1789. The day everything changes. The day when stone walls fall and invisible barriers shatter. The day when the impossible becomes inevitable. The moment when history breaks its chains. The bells of Paris ring not for prayer but for revolution. The streets run with blood that will stain the cobblestones for years to come. And somewhere, in the chaos and the smoke and the screaming, a new world is being born from the corpse of the old. Paris, just months before. The city breathes with a rhythm unchanged for generations, ancient and assured. Dawn breaks over the Seine, gilding the spires of Notre Dame and catching in the mullioned windows of riverside mansions. Market women haul their baskets through the Halles, their voices rising in familiar arguments over the price of bread, the quality of cheese, the freshness of fish pulled from the river before sunrise. Along the Rue Saint-Honoré, perfumers open their shops, releasing clouds of lavender and jasmine into the morning air, where they mingle with the smell of baking bread and horse dung. Aristocrats in silk coats embroidered with silver thread step from their carriages, their powdered wigs catching the light, their shoes clicking on cobblestones. The bells of Sainte-Chapelle call the faithful to prayer, their sound echoing across rooftops and through narrow medieval streets. In the workshops of the Marais, craftsmen bend over their work, hands moving with the precision of tradition passed from master to apprentice across centuries. Furniture makers, clockmakers, tailors creating garments that cost more than a laborer earns in a year. The royal family resides at Versailles, 12 miles distant, a world of mirrors and gold where time itself seems suspended, where courtiers drift through endless ceremonies, where the king dines in public and the queen plays shepherdess in her hamlet, while real shepherds starve in the fields. The Kingdom of France, the most powerful in Europe, the center of culture and refinement, functions as it always has, divided into its ancient orders. Those who pray, those who fight, and those who work. The clergy hold their lands, the nobles hold their privileges, and everyone else holds nothing but obligation. The system is eternal, or so it seems. Children play in the Luxembourg gardens. Wine flows in the taverns of the Latin Quarter where students argue philosophy. Life follows its appointed course, predictable as the seasons, solid as stone, unquestionable as God himself. Each person knows their place, their role, their destiny written by birth. But beneath the surface, invisible as plague before it strikes, something grows. It has no face, no army, no single leader yet. It is hunger, yes, but also something deeper and more dangerous. It is the whisper of new ideas traveling through coffee houses and salons, spoken in low voices behind closed doors. Words printed on pamphlets passed hand to hand in the shadows, hidden under coats, read by candlelight. Enlightenment philosophy, once the plaything of intellectuals and wealthy dilettantes, now seeps into the consciousness of a nation like water through cracked stone. Rousseau speaks of the general will, of natural rights, of the social contract that binds ruler and ruled. Voltaire mocks the pretensions of kings and priests, his wit sharp enough to cut through centuries of divine right. Montesquieu argues for separation of powers, for checks against tyranny. These are not merely ideas discussed in abstract terms. They are seeds planted in soil made fertile by decades of mismanagement and neglect, by corruption and incompetence at every level. The Treasury is bankrupt from endless wars, from the 7 Years' War and American independence, from the royal household that spends millions while the kingdom starves. Harvests fail. The winter of 1788 is brutal. The price of bread climbs beyond reach, and bread is life itself for those who have nothing else. Taxes crush those least able to pay while the privileged pay nothing, protected by ancient exemptions and clever lawyers. The invisible enemy is not a person. It is a system that has calcified, that can no longer bend, that will break rather than reform. It is the rage of the hungry watching the rich feast through windows they cannot enter. It is the fury of the powerless who discover, slowly and then suddenly, that they might have power after all. The threat does not come from outside the kingdom. It comes from within, from the heart of the realm itself, from the gap between what is and what could be, waiting for the spark that will ignite everything. The crisis accelerates through the spring like a fever rising. King Louis, well-meaning but weak, calls the Estates General, the first in 175 years, hoping to solve his financial nightmare through taxation. Representatives arrive in Versailles from across the kingdom, 600 from the Third Estate alone. They come with lists of grievances compiled in every town and village, thousands of pages documenting injustice. They expect to be heard. They expect reform. Instead, they are locked out of their meeting hall on a rain-soaked morning in June. On a tennis court, 600 men swear an oath not to disperse until France has a constitution, until the absolute power of the king is limited by law. The monarchy, slow to recognize the danger, responds with threats rather than compromise. Royal troops begin to mass around Paris, 20,000 soldiers moving into position. Foreign regiments, Swiss and German mercenaries loyal only to gold, take positions in the city and its approaches. The people see bayonets in their streets and understand the meaning. They watch artillery being positioned on hills overlooking their neighborhoods. Rumors spread like wildfire through workshops and markets. The king will dissolve the National Assembly by force. The aristocrats will massacre the commoners. Bread will be withheld until submission. Finance Minister Necker, the Swiss banker popular with the people for attempting reform, is dismissed. The news reaches Paris on July 11th. The city explodes. Within hours, crowds surge through the streets, hunting for weapons, any weapons. They raid gunsmiths, smashing windows and taking everything. They raid monasteries where old swords hang on walls. They raid the Invalids' Hospital and arsenal, overwhelming the guards, seizing 30,000 muskets and 20 cannon. But muskets need powder. They need ammunition. They need a target for their rage. And there, looming over the eastern districts like a dark prophecy, stands the Bastille, ancient fortress, state prison, symbol of royal tyranny, its 8 towers rising 90 feet above the neighborhood, its thick walls holding who knows what secrets, what prisoners, what stores of gunpowder and arms. July 14th dawns hot and tense, the air heavy with threat. A delegation approaches the Bastille at 10 in the morning, demanding the fortress surrender its weapons and ammunition to the people. Governor Bernard de Launay, a professional soldier of the old school, invites them inside to negotiate. They talk for hours while outside the tension builds. The crowd grows. Hundreds become thousands, armed with whatever they could find. Muskets stolen from the Invalides, pikes forged in workshops through the night. Rage sharpened to a lethal point. They fill the streets around the fortress. They press against the outer walls. By early afternoon, patience shatters like glass. Someone cuts the chains of the first drawbridge. The mob surges into the outer courtyard, a human wave screaming for justice and vengeance. Defenders on the walls open fire. Musket balls tear through flesh and bone. Men fall screaming. The crowd returns fire, wild and inaccurate but relentless, a storm of lead. Smoke fills the air, acrid and blinding. The noise is deafening, a continuous roar of gunfire, shouting, screaming, the sound of death multiplying by the minute. 2 carts loaded with straw are set ablaze and rolled toward the gates, flames leaping 10 feet high. The heat is unbearable. French guards, professional soldiers who have defected to the people's side, arrive with cannon dragged through the streets by hand. They position the guns point-blank at the inner gates, so close the defenders can see their faces. The bombardment begins. Wood splinters, stone cracks. The gates shudder under the impact. Inside the Bastille, Delaunay and his garrison of 82 invalids and Swiss guards realize they cannot hold. They have gunpowder enough to level the neighborhood, but no reinforcements coming. They face annihilation. A white flag appears on the walls. The gates open. The crowd floods in like a torrent, unstoppable, overwhelming. The fortress falls in minutes. 7 prisoners are found inside, confused and blinking in the sudden daylight, paraded through the streets as symbols of liberation, though none are political prisoners. Delaunay is dragged through the mob. He tries to defend himself. He kicks a baker in the groin. The baker's friends stab him repeatedly, their knives finding him again and again. A cook named Desno saws off his head with a pocket knife, working through cartilage and bone. It takes a long time. The head is mounted on a pike. The people dance in the street. The Bastille is torn down stone by stone over the following days, entrepreneurs selling chunks as souvenirs of freedom. A line has been crossed. Blood has been spilled. Power has shifted. Nothing will ever be the same. The revolution has begun. The fall of the fortress unleashes something that cannot be controlled or contained. It is not merely political revolution. It is the collapse of certainty itself, the shattering of every assumption that held society together. In the countryside, peasants burn chateaux, destroying feudal records that bind them to their lords, archives of obligations going back centuries consumed by flames. Nobles flee in the night, abandoning everything. In the cities, ancient hierarchies dissolve. Servants abandon their masters. Apprentices challenge their masters. But liberation breeds terror. The violence does not end with the Bastille. It multiplies, mutates, transforms. Suspicion becomes currency more valuable than gold. Neighbor denounces neighbor for insufficient revolutionary fervor. The search for enemies becomes obsessive. Those who hesitate are suspects. Those who question are traitors. Counter-revolutionaries lurk everywhere, real and imagined. The revolution begins to consume itself with a hunger that cannot be satisfied. Moderates are replaced by radicals, radicals by extremists, extremists by madmen. The guillotine, invented as a humane method of execution, becomes the symbol of mass death, its blade falling day after day in the Place de la Révolution. Thousands will die, aristocrats and priests and commoners alike. The king who called the Estates General will lose his crown, then his head. The queen will follow. The revolution that began with demands for bread and representation transforms into the reign of terror, where the revolution itself becomes the enemy, devouring its own children. Robespierre, Danton, Desmoulins, all will fall. Philosophy gives way to paranoia. Hope curdles into fear. The ideals of liberty and equality become weapons used to justify murder. The crowd that stormed the Bastille seeking freedom creates instead a new tyranny, more efficient and merciless than the old. The invisible enemy reveals its true face. Not monarchy, not aristocracy, but human nature itself when all restraints are removed, when righteousness becomes rage. The smoke clears eventually, though it takes years. Napoleon rises from the chaos, a general who becomes consul, who becomes emperor, transforming revolution into empire, spreading its principles across Europe at the point of a bayonet. The Code Napoleon replaces feudal law with rational administration. Merit challenges birthright. The map of Europe is redrawn in blood and treaty. When the emperor finally falls, exiled to a distant island, the old kings return, the Bourbons restored to their throne. But the world has changed too much to fully restore. The ideas released in 1789 cannot be suppressed or forgotten. Representative government, citizenship, equality before law, separation of church and state. These concepts seep across borders and generations like water finding its level. The fall of the Bastille becomes mythology, celebrated each year as the birth of French democracy, the founding moment of the nation. The fortress itself is gone, its stones scattered, replaced by a column in a square where traffic flows and tourists take photographs, unaware that beneath their feet lies the foundation of a world they demolished. That hot July day was not the end of tyranny. It was the beginning of modern politics, with all its promise and all its horror. The lesson is not simple. Revolutions devour what they create. Freedom requires more than fury. Building a just society demands patience, compromise, wisdom. The Bastille fell in hours. Building what comes after takes centuries, and the work is never finished. The ghosts still linger. Every time we storm our Bastilles, tear down our walls, we must remember. The hardest part is not the destruction. It is what we build from the rubble. The past is not dead. It is not even past. It lives in every struggle for justice, every fight against oppression, every moment when the powerless find their power. July 14th echoes still.